Hey, welcome to the Cheap Air Gunner channel. It's Cherokee Steve. I was just doing some work on my Hatsan Flashpup in 25 caliber. A couple of different things, and I thought I would go over them for anyone out there who is an owner of a Flashpup or considering purchasing a Flashpup. Now, the first thing is covered fairly well instruction-wise in the instruction manual. But out of the box, the trigger, the Quattro trigger on my Flashpup was breaking at over 3 pounds. I believe it was 3 pounds, 8 ounces it was consistently breaking at, using my trigger pull gauge. Now, although I had become accustomed to it breaking at that point, I did notice that I was consistently pulling my shots to the right, and that would have to do with a heavy trigger pull. As I'm pulling, I'm actually pulling the gun this way as I'm trying to pull the trigger back. And we'll see. I ultimately decided it was worth making the adjustment, especially since the Quattro trigger, number one, is pretty easy to adjust, and it has a nice range of adjustability. So basically what it has is 3 adjustment screws to the trigger, which you can get to, and I'll show that in a second. You can get to without removing the upper part of the bullpup from the stock. They do give you an access hole and an access slot to get to the 3 screws. But screw number 1 is for trigger pull force. The second screw is for trigger travel, and that's during the second stage. Screw number 3 is for adjusting the force of the pull of the trigger until the end of the first stage. Trigger pull force prior to discharge, trigger travel prior to discharge, and force of the pull of the trigger until the end of the first stage. And the stages are very clear. It's another nice feature with the Quattro trigger. Your first stage going into your second stage, it's very obvious, at least on my Flashpup, where the first stage ends and the second stage starts. But making the adjustment to the trigger pull force is what I wanted to do. So here's what I'm talking about as far as the slot goes. And I'll back this slide out in a second. But starting at the right-hand side of the slot, the way that I'm holding it, which is facing towards the front of the gun, that is the one I'll be adjusting to adjust the trigger pull force. That's screw number 1. The one directly next to it to the left is screw number 2 in the instructions. And in the hole at the bottom is screw number 3. Now, unfortunately, they do give you an Allen wrench in the box of extra stuff, including the fill probe. But they give you a 2.5 millimeter Allen key. But it's a short-handled one. What I would recommend, because the only way you're going to be able to get down inside as deep as the slot and hole is, number one, the screws do have tension to them. Using the short end of the Allen wrench, you're not going to be able to get down into the full depth and access those bolts. You could if you remove the upper part of the gun from the stock, but I didn't want to do that. There was really no need, and that's what the slot and the hole are there for. So using the long end to access the adjustment bolt is what I did. And there was some pretty good tension on it. It's takes a pretty decent amount of force. Just getting the torque from the longer handle on this one versus the one that they give you. Here's the one that comes with the extra parts box that comes with the gun, the silver one. Short handle, 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. I would suggest getting yourself a good set of longer metric Allen wrenches and using that. It did help. Basically, you're just going to access that number one screw, the one to the right, and turn the wrench clockwise to decrease the trigger pull force. I was working in about quarter turns in checking, and I had to go, I would say, a good full turn in to get the trigger pull force to drop from 3 pounds 8 ounces to where it is now, which is 1 pound 14 ounces, is where it's consistently breaking. That was even lighter. That's about 1 pound 8 ounces. 1.5 pounds. So that is great for me. Big improvement over where it came out of the box. Now, the second thing I needed to adjust wasn't really an adjustment. I needed to tighten down something. The butt plate pad kept, I thought it was the pad, kept moving on me. It would, not up and down, but it would rotate side to side, or at least I thought that's what was happening. But what actually was happening, now there's no mention in the instruction manual that the butt pad is adjustable, or how to adjust it, but, and I think I've explained this in a previous video, but I'll do it again. Here in the center, there is a slot which has a nut that rides inside of it. And basically, the butt pad itself screws into that nut, and that slot allows it to be moved up or down. Now, what was happening as it would rotate, and it was doing it fairly easily, I was continuously tightening down the screw in the butt pad. And if I can get a closer shot here, you can see where the nut was and the deformation that my over-tightening was causing. The nut was being pulled into the plastic that retains it in that slot, and was actually deforming the plastic slot, because that isn't what was moving. over here on the side, you could see the line here of this plastic piece that the butt pad actually attaches to. That's what was rotating. The pad and the piece that it attaches to, which is what these two screws are for, and they were loose. These use a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench, which I tighten those down, and that should take care of my rotation of the butt pad problem. Not constantly tightening down the pad over and over again as I was. At a certain point, you're gonna crack this plastic, and then that nut is just gonna come through, and you would be forced to tighten it down above or below where that cracked plastic is gonna be in order to use it, which probably is not where you really want your butt pad to be. So be very careful in adjusting that. You do not have to over tighten this screw at all. Slight pressure. Just make sure that these two screws holding the butt plate onto the stock are tight. Otherwise, you can get rotation. And they really were loose. And it was something I hadn't touched at all on the gun out of the box. The only thing I did was remove this when I did the camel paint job on the stock and then reattached it. So that must have been loose from the factory. So keep that in mind when you're making your butt pad adjustments. If you've got this off, you might as well go ahead and tighten those down if it needs tightening. So that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to cover, the Quattro trigger adjustment and the adjustment that I needed to make, which was to the trigger pull force and the butt pad, butt plate adjustment, butt pad plate. Remember, do not, if you're sensing movement from your butt pad, it isn't necessarily the pad that's moving, the plate that the butt pad adjusts to, and you can damage the slot, adjustment slot for the butt pad by over tightening it. So be careful. Hope this helps, and thanks for checking out the video, guys. Stay safe and shoot safe, and take care.